After the tsunami struck the coast of southern India in 2004, massive underwater ruins were discovered, which experts believe dated back to the 3rd century AD. Almost immediately, there were rumors that archaeologists had unearthed the famous 6 lost pagodas described in local folklore. There was also controversy about the official dating of the site. 1 or 2 researchers believe that geological evidence combined with a centuries-old local tale about the destruction of a city by a great flood suggest a date of 10,000 years ago for some of the recently revealed ruins. Ancient Mahabalipuram. The small coastal town of Mahabalipuram in Tamil Nadu, 30 miles south of Madras in southern India, is famous for its temples and monuments built by the Pallava dynasty in the 7th and 8th centuries. During the reign of this dynasty, it became an important center of art, architecture, and literature. The most important of the surviving ancient structures on the site is known as the Shore Temple, a complex of beautifully constructed shrines built of cut stones rather than carved out of caves as are neighboring structures. This 5-story building has its entrance through a barrel-vaulted gateway and is decorated with intricate bas-reliefs and sculptures. It contains 2 shrines, one dedicated to Shiva and the other to Vishnu. The roof of the shrine has been fashioned to resemble a pyramid. According to some accounts, due to the copper domes at the top of the structure reflecting the sun's rays, it acted as a nautical guide for approaching ships at sea. One curiosity at the site is that early European explorers in the area talk about 7 pagodas, named for the pagoda-like style of Hindu temples in this part of India, rather than 1. Local legend also mentions the 7 pagodas which once lined the shore, saying that they were so beautiful that the gods destroyed all but 1, the Shore Temple, which survives today. These myths were recorded by British traveller J. Gondingham, who visited the South Indian coastal town in 1798. But hundreds of years earlier, the 13th century account of the Venetian explorer Marco Polo's travels described his travels in Asia. In this book, The Book of the Marvels of the World, written around 1300, Marco Polo also gives a detailed description of 7 pagodas or temples that loomed so large on the Indian shore that he could see them from many miles distant. Indian tsunami reveals ancient ruins. In December 2004, a deadly tsunami devastated hundreds of miles of shoreline across Asia. Thousands of lives were lost and millions of dollars of damage was caused. But while the tsunami created substantial damage to the existing ancient structures at Mahabalipuram, though not, surprisingly enough, the Shore Temple, and left the town waterlogged for days, it also unearthed some long-lost treasures. During the chaos and destruction, magnificent ancient ruins were revealed in the area of Mahabalipuram. The ancient monuments were revealed when the floodwaters receded and the force of the water removed sand deposits that had previously covered the structures, which experts believe to belong to a port city built in the 7th century AD. Archaeologists had in fact been investigating the area for 2 years before the tsunami hit. In April 2002, an expedition team jointly sponsored by Great Britain's Scientific Exploration Society (SES) and India's Natural Institute of Oceanography discovered submerged ruins off the coast. The divers uncovered the foundation of walls, broken pillars, steps, and many scattered stone blocks. After the 2004 tsunami, some local fishermen claimed to have seen at least 6 vanished temples when the waters fell back. One of these, a young man, said, "There must have been at least 20. We had no idea there were so many out there." Another fisherman said, "You could see the destroyed walls covered in coral and the broken down temple in the middle. My grandfather said there was a port here once and a temple, but suddenly we could see it was real. We could see that something was out there." But archaeologists dismissed talk of the discovery of 20 temples. The head of excavations at the site for the Archaeological Survey of India said that the fishermen believe every stone is a temple. But while these 20 temples were not discovered, archaeologists did identify several stone sculptures buried in the sand close to the Shore Temple. These were predominantly around 6 feet tall and had elaborate engravings of the type found in the rock-hewn Mahabalipuram temple. The sculptures included an elaborately carved head of an elephant, a galloping horse, and a reclining lion. A doctor of the Archaeological Survey of India said of the discoveries that they may be part of the small seaport city which existed here before the water engulfed them. They could be part of a temple or a building. We are investigating. The Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, and the Navy conducted sonar searches underwater after the tsunami and discovered 2 more temple complexes and a cave temple. While these do not confirm that there are actually 7 pagodas, the search is ongoing in the area. Alternative theories. A few researchers believe that the site dates much farther back than historians and archaeologists think. Indeed, the town was already a thriving seaport on the Bay of Bengal long before the Pallava Empire. A large number of coins and other artifacts have been excavated from this region, which indicate trade relations with the Romans 2,000 years ago. But could it have been even older than that? One of the local legends about the destruction of the ancient site by a flood, leaving the shore temple as the only evidence that this remarkable city had once existed, has inspired researchers to push back the date of its submergence by millennia. There are some who think that Mahabalipuram suffered from a great flood between 10,000 and 13,000 BC and was submerged beneath the waves. Author Graham Hancock was one of the main members of a team of divers from the Indian National Institute of Oceanography and the Scientific Exploration Society based in Dorset in the UK, who surveyed the ocean bed in 2002. Unsurprisingly, considering the nature of the books he's written, Hancock is firmly behind the theory that the city was destroyed in a great flood more than 10,000 years ago. Hancock said, "I have long regarded it because of its flood myths and fishermen's sightings as a very likely place in which discoveries of underwater structures could be made, and I propose that a diving expedition should be undertaken there. I have argued for many years that the world's flood myths deserve to be taken seriously, a view that most Western academics reject. But here, we have proved the myths right and the academics wrong." Hancock also said that Durham University geologist Glenn Milne informed him that the site could be 6,000 years old, though he himself believes it's thousands of years older even than that. If Hancock's theory were true, it would be an unheard-of development in world archaeology, as there is no previous archaeological evidence for a culture in India 6,000 years ago capable of building anything even remotely resembling the temples. Supporters of this theory point out the fact that after the tsunami, there were reports that a long, straight row of large rocks had emerged from the water just before the waters rushed back again. Unfortunately, when these waters returned, these mysterious features were once again submerged. Recent discoveries. More than 10 years later, archaeologists discovered remains which appear to support to some extent what the fishermen claimed to have seen in 2004. In 2016, a 10-man team of scientists and divers discovered the ruins of what appeared to be one of the 6 lost pagoda temples, a 33-foot-long wall, a short flight of stairs, and cut stone blocks scattered over the seabed just over a third of a mile from the shore. Marine archaeologists and head of the diving team Rajiv Nigam said of the discoveries that though some of the remains were badly damaged due to strong underwater current and swell and covered with thick aquatic growth, they could make out that they were part of a building complex. The structures are thought to be around 1,100 to 1,500 years old, though the team also identified older brick structures typical of the Sangam period 300 BC to 200 AD. Apart from Hancock et al. And their hypotheses that a 10,000-year-old flood destroyed an Atlantis-type civilization, there are 2 main theories as to what destroyed the site. Some archaeologists believe that most of the temple complex was probably destroyed in a previous tsunami in the 13th century. Others, however, mainly geologists, point to the severe coastal fluctuation in the area over the last 5,000 years, and suggest that the site quite simply eroded away over time and slipped into the ocean. Work is ongoing at the site, with a strong possibility of identifying more important structures and their purpose, as well as obtaining a better understanding of the history of the city as a whole. The myth of the 7 pagodas may one day prove to be more than just a story. A new scientific study of an ice core sample from Greenland has demonstrated how the Central American Ilopango mega eruption wiped out an entire Maya area 1,590 years ago. Oxford University archaeologist and lead author of the new research paper, Dr. Victoria Smith, told Ars Technica that her radiocarbon analysis confirmed El Salvador's Ilopango mega eruption occurred in 431 AD. She said that the resulting ejection was 50 times bigger than the May 18, 1980 Mount St. Helens mega eruption in southwestern Washington, USA, which was one of the greatest volcanic explosions ever recorded in the Americas. The Ilopango mega eruption cooled the entire planet. Today, Lake Ilopango is a crater lake situated about 6 miles from modern-day San Salvador. The volcanic crater belongs to El Salvador's volcanic arc of 20 active volcanoes, representing one of the most seismically active regions in Central America. A 2019 paper featured in Science magazine said that the Ilopango mega eruption caused an 18-month period of global cooling around 536 AD, marked by cloudy skies, crop failures, and famines as far away as China. However, Dr. Smith's new research established that this catastrophic eruption occurred more than a century earlier than previously thought. The Ilopango mega eruption was successfully dated after ice core samples from Greenland were compared with samples of charred mahogany trees discovered in ash deposits around the volcano. This enabled the team of archaeologists to date the massive Ilopango volcanic explosion to the year 431 AD. Using 3D modeling, the researchers were able to estimate that the Ilopango mega eruption plume rose some 28 miles into the upper atmosphere, and that air currents carried it as far as Antarctica, more than 4,300 miles away. The gods must have been furious that day, 431 AD. Millions of tons of white ash from the Ilopango mega eruption spread across more than 770,000 square miles, 200 million hectares of Central America. The event was called the Tierra Blanca Joven, Spanish for Young White Earth. The eruption was so destructive that it would have darkened the entire region for at least a week. And if this weren't enough for one Armageddon-like event, the Ilopango explosion also caused a series of climatic events that led to a strange 18-month era of global cooling, according to the latest paper. A report in the Daily Mail gives a graphic description of the days leading up to the Ilopango mega eruption that immediately destroyed every living thing within 25 miles of the blast and rendered an area twice that size uninhabitable for more than a century. The rising lava lake within the mountain would have created bizarre sounds across the immediate environment, and the pitch of these sounds would have increased with rising pressure as the magma channeled up the mountain to the surface. Then, as the magma neared the surface of the mountain vent in the hours before the eruption, a series of tremors and earthquakes would coincide with a pressure decrease in the volcano, causing sulfur dioxide and a host of other toxic gases to escape. And then, as if the gods themselves were at work, the local Mayas would have witnessed the mountain changing shape as it swelled, cracked and sunk as magma collapsed the mountain's internal geological fault lines. The Ilopango mega eruption, a rare paradigm-changing event. The researchers involved in the latest study examined numerous major mega eruptions and concluded that the Ilopango seismic event's volume of its pyroclastic flows, which are fast-moving currents of gas, volcanic ash and pumice, were 10 times that of Mount Vesuvius when it buried Pompeii, and that it killed every living thing within a 25-mile radius and rendered an area twice that size uninhabitable for a century and a half. The Ilopango mega eruption was undoubtedly one of the most violent, earth-shattering events in Maya history. You would imagine such a catastrophe would have destroyed all of Maya civilization, but luckily the Mayas had, by that time, spread across southern Mexico, Guatemala, and northern Belize. However, what did affect global civilization at the time was Dr. Smith's observation that Ilopango mega eruption probably lowered summer temperatures for a few years in the southern hemisphere, which would have required an entire overhaul of agricultural drainage and watering systems, which lay at the pulsing heart of this indigenous society. Following Julius Caesar's assassination in 44 BC, extreme climate changes led to crop failures, which in turn fueled the increasing social unrest in Rome, adding greatly to the social disruption caused by the civil war that brought the Republic to an empire. The string of events caused the collapse of the Roman Republic, but now a recent study suggests that the cause of the climatic change was a volcanic eruption of Mount Okmok over 9,000 kilometers away in Alaska. A new paper published by PNAS by environmental researcher Joe McConnell of the Desert Research Institute, which is affiliated with the University of Nevada, Reno, explains how ancient Roman writers described short growing seasons caused by cold weather, resulting in crop failures and famine in northern Italy and northern Greece between April 43 BC through 36 BC in what was already a turbulent time. Erupting volcanoes eject sulfur dioxide high into the Earth's stratosphere, where it reflects solar radiation, blocks the sun's light, and sharply decreases the temperature on continents, sometimes a long way away from the epicenter of the eruption. Scientists have never been quite sure which volcano caused the natural disasters in Rome until now. Just before Caesar's death in 44 BC, Mount Etna exploded, and it's known that this caused some of the climate changes described by writers in that year. But the new study of Greenland ice cores from north-central Greenland found volcanic ash and sulfuric acid in the ice layers of snow that had been laid down in the early winter of 43 BC, and for the next 2 years, which suggested the historic blast came from Mount Okmok in modern-day Alaska. Dr. McConnell told Ars Technica that his team found the Okmok 2 sulfur fallout in every Arctic ice core record that they had access to, including 5 from all over Greenland and 1 from Akademi Nok in the Russian Arctic. Furthermore, the geochemistry of the frozen sulfur infused ash-matched layers of tephra rock fragments associated with an ancient eruption of Mount Okmok II, which the researchers say was one of the largest eruptions of the last few thousand years, and that the results of this ejection are comparable to Mount Pinatubo in 1991, Krakatoa in 1883, or Tambora in 1815. Analyzing geochemical fingerprints. Testing their suspicions, Connell and his colleagues created computer simulations of the Okmok 2 eruption, and their models predicted summer temperatures in the years after the eruption would be 2 to 3 degrees centigrade cooler than usual across most of the northern hemisphere. And this matched the observed climatology described by the ancient writers. McConnell told Ars Technica that geochemically fingerprinting the ash samples was the key to identifying the volcanic source, and that this knowledge underpinned their detailed climate monitoring. The Okmok II eruption lasted from 43 to 41 BC, while the Roman Republic was already rotten at its core with the violent power struggles following Julius Caesar's death. And the paper explains that natural disasters are known historically to create a state of exception, in which business as usual becomes unfeasible and political and cultural norms are suspended, therefore providing room for rapid and social political change, wrote McConnell. Survival in ancient Egypt depended greatly on the Nile's summer floods fertilizing the fields along its banks, while Mediterranean coastal farmers most often dealt with too much rain, and the ancient writers say that in 43 and 42 BC the floods didn't come, but that a terrible famine occurred in those years. And the reason for this, according to the new paper, is because Mount Okmok II cooled the northern hemisphere, short-circuiting the weather system that produces the Nile's annual flood. McConnell explained that differential cooling shifts equatorial rain belts north or south, and when eruptions occur in high northern latitudes, like at Okmok II in 43 BC, failures in East African summer monsoons result in drought in the headwaters of the Nile, and so a failure in the all-important summer flood. Thus, McConnell and his team have successfully analyzed ancient ice samples gathered on another continent to illustrate the events leading up to the collapse of ancient Rome. In the book Forbidden Archaeology, authors Richard Thompsen and Michael Cremo essentially stated that academic science was engaged in a massive cover-up regarding the history and origins of the human race on Earth. Nonsense? Perhaps not. Working under a grant from the National Science Foundation in 1966, Dr. Virginia Steen McIntyre and her team had been commissioned to date two archaeological sites in Mexico, namely Huehuetlacco, where the very sophisticated stone tools had been unearthed, and El Horno, where other interesting, if less sophisticated items had been discovered. Initial estimates dated the sites at 20,000 years old, which, according to thinking of the time, would have put the sites close to the dawn of human civilization, at least in the Americas. Dr. Steen McIntyre used 4 clear and accepted methods to test the sites. Every time the results came back, they were the same, and they were a long way off the estimates. According to Dr. Steen McIntyre's tests, the sites were closer to 250,000 years old. Her results went against everything accepted science stated it knew. However, instead of being applauded and hailed for having made such a breakthrough in our knowledge of human history, bearing in mind she had solid results to back up her theory, she was instead ridiculed and her character vilified. She struggled to maintain steady work in her field after making her claims. A warning to others? Over 100 years earlier, when gold was discovered in abundance at Table Mountain in California, following the digging and mining that went thousands of feet down into the earth, hundreds of stone artifacts and even human fossils were discovered. The age of the site and the remains, according to then California State geologist J.D. Whitney, was anywhere from 9 to 55 million years old. Like Dr. Steen McIntyre, Whitney offered an abundance of evidence and in-depth reports on the finds. However, despite this, he was dismissed and his findings almost erased from the record and history books. The site was sealed, almost as if nothing had ever been found. Perhaps even stranger are some of the South African mines, where for decades miners have brought to the surface from deep inside the mines themselves hundreds of small metallic spheres, each with encircling parallel grooves. The site itself and the level at which these spheres are found are anywhere up to 3 billion years old. Despite these remarkable finds, mainstream science refuses to acknowledge them, and no seriously funded studies have been carried out on them or their origins. One of the most controversial theories put forward to and ultimately rejected from mainstream science and history was that of Immanuel Velikovsky. Immanuel Velikovsky seemed to outrage mainstream thinking in 1950 when he released his book Worlds in Collision and stated that cataclysmic disasters recorded in the Bible and echoed in other ancient writings such as the ancient Egyptians, the Mayas to name just 2, were convulsions of the universe that our ancestors deep in antiquity witnessed firsthand, including Venus and Mars being dragged into orbits too close to the Earth. Velikovsky stated that Venus was once part of the planet Jupiter until around 4,000 years ago when an explosion catapulted it into space, blazing brightly and trailing a slipstream of dust and gases as it went. He further stated that the Earth moved into the outer edges of the slipstream around the 15th century BC, which resulted in a red dust covering the rain that fell. Velikovsky cited the Book of Exodus, which reads, "All the water that was in the Nile turned to blood." This was then followed by showers of meteorites as Venus passed, which Velikovsky said was documented clearly in the Mexican annals. The sky rained not water, but fire and red-hot stones. As Venus passed on its way, Earth was pulled off its axis by the gravitational pull, and hurricanes and massive floods took place on Earth. The Caxinhua of Brazil wrote that heaven and earth changed places, and Persian records state that 3 days of light was followed by 3 days of darkness. Velikovsky even went on as far to say that it was at this moment in time when Moses led the Israelites across the Sea of Passage, whose waters had parted, he claimed, due to gravitational and electromagnetic forces between the two planets, and for the same reason they came crashing back to their rightful place, covering the seabed. Venus swung past Earth again in the 14th century BC, bringing with it equally destructive effects before finally settling into its current orbit. In the 8th century BC, however, Venus this time came too close to Mars and pushed it into an orbit that clashed with that of Earth, and did so every 15 years until 687 BC, when it finally settled into its own orbit. Again, Velikovsky offered proof of these accounts from the Bible and ancient writings, including the following from the Chinese bamboo books that stated, "The stars fell like rain and the earth shook." He also pointed to the fact that it seemed to be around this time in history that Mars replaced Venus as the prominent, most powerful god in both Roman and Greek cultures. Indeed, even the scar on Mars was cited as being the result of electromagnetic energy between the two celestial bodies that had all but collided. Wild claims that they were disregarded and mocked in equal measure. Was he right? We will probably never know for sure, but let's take a quick look at some of his, then, wild claims, and then have since been proven and accepted by mainstream science as now fact. For example, he argues that Venus was incandescent in ancient times and would essentially still be a planet with soaring temperatures. Velikovsky was scoffed at for this claim. Conventional wisdom at the time said proof stated Venus was freezing due to thick cloud. However, in 1962, NASA's Mariner 2 satellite showed the surface temperature to be 800 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to melt lead. It was then discovered that actual temperatures on the planet were in excess of 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. He also claimed that Jupiter, the planet that he had stated projected what would become Venus into the solar system, emitted radio noise. By 1960, it was proven that Jupiter had a radiation belt that emitted over 1,000 times more energy than Earth's Van Allen belt. Another key claim, especially given his claims of the Venus slipstream, was that some cometary tails and meteorites contain hydrocarbons. Around a year after his wild claim, it was proven to be exactly right, and before the end of the 1950s, it was confirmed that hydrocarbons in meteorites were made of many of the same compounds as those on Earth. If there is evidence and proof that differs from our accepted version of history, more than if it is being covered up from the general population, we should ask why. Why would this knowledge want to be hidden from us? Is it because they feel that the organized religion would suffer and essentially be made irrelevant should we discover that our history on Earth is not as we've been taught? Is it simply to save the embarrassment and laborious task of having to rewrite our history as though we knew it? Enough evidence is there to warrant serious study into these and many more claims that suggest we have only gotten a piece of the story. Might there perhaps have been civilizations that existed here on Earth millions, perhaps billions of years ago and were simply wiped off the face of the planet, and over time have literally been forgotten? What would happen to us if a cataclysmic event wiped out the human race? Over the thousands of years that it might take for life to start again, what would happen to our infrastructure, our records? We may become just as forgotten, and life may start again, entirely from scratch, and one day that they would think that their race was the first civilization, and before that there was nothing. How wrong could they be? For centuries, there have been tales of beings, some human and some not, living in the vast cavities that exist deep beneath the surface of the Earth. But exactly who or what these beings are and what they want is open to question. Sometimes these tales are based on half-remembered rumors, and there has seldom been anything definite. But there are also ancient structures, such as the necropolis called the Hal Salflieni Hypogeum in Malta, that helps corroborate such tales. This strange subterranean construction, which dates from around 4000 BCE, is one of Europe's only known Neolithic underground dwellings. Elsewhere, there are several others, including Derinkuyu in Turkey, the underground city of Neyaz in northern France, and of course the fascinating and hauntingly beautiful city of Petra in southern Jordan. Strange indeed, but at least we know they exist. However, there are others that are more questionable, particularly those that hint at the existence of long-lost technologies. One of these is the legendary city of Shin Au Av that is said to lie deep below Death Valley, a vast and barren area that straddles the California-Nevada border in the USA. This strange hidden city, whose name means God's Land or Ghostland, is thought to have contained many anomalous and out-of-place artifacts that should not belong to the era in which it was supposedly built. There are two versions of how this underground city came to being, although they may be closely interlinked. One version implies that it is linked to a race that existed at the dawn of time and had a presence worldwide. They were called the Serpent People. In India, they were known as the Naga, or snakes, and at the Quetzalcoatl, or plume serpent, in ancient Mexico. The ancient Egyptians called them the Jedhai, and the Chinese knew them as lung or dragons. In ancient Britain, they were called adders, or the serpents of wisdom. Appropriately enough, the name adder is also given to a species of poisonous snake that is indigenous to areas of the UK. It doesn't seem to matter which race encountered them, because they were invariably worshipped and regarded as helpers and prophets. All of the legends that say this mysterious race could either take human or reptilian form, and as is the way with reptiles and snakes, lived below the surface and created underground cities worldwide. Under the guidance of these serpent people, dragon cultures developed, which normally involved the construction of huge pyramids and other structures covered with serpent motifs. These cultures were hand-ruled by benevolent dragon kings, and even today signs of vanished races are still evident. In fact, these legends associated with the Paiute tribe resonate strongly with other Native American tribes, notably the Hopi and Zuni peoples, whose creation legends also tell of their ancestors' emergence from the dark, subterranean world. It is unlikely that at the dawn of time these people would have direct contact, so it's strange how closely their legends have become intermingled. For many centuries, the legends of the Paiute tribe of North America have told of this lost city, also referred to as the Ghostland. According to legend, Shin Au Av was formed when a young god, Shino Avakates, was asked to take a sealed bag across the desert and only open it when he got to the other side. But because he was young and he felt movement inside the bag, the god became curious and opened it, allowing the contents, in this case hordes of human beings, to escape. These people, who eventually became known by the name of the god Shinoav, saw some mountains in the distance and ran towards them. One of the older gods saw this and demanded to know why he had done this, and a furious row developed. According to the legend, the people heard the heated exchange but could see nothing, so they became afraid and dug a tunnel and hid in it, which is how the underground city was created. These events became part of Paiute creation legends and were adopted into their belief of an afterlife. Another part of this legend tells of how, many centuries later, the wife of a Paiute chief died in childbirth, and in his grief he wanted to be reunited with her, so traveled to the land of the dead. This involved passing through a miles-long underground passage, and on his journey he was attacked by the fearsome creatures that lived there. Finally, he got to the end of the passage and found himself standing at the end of a narrow bridge carved from the solid rock. The bridge crossed what he looked like a bottomless chasm. He crossed the bridge and finally arrived in the land of the dead, which was ruled over by Shinoav. One of the inhabitants met him, a strangely beautiful female with snake-like features, who took him into a huge open area. Here he saw thousands of dead members of his tribe dancing. He asked if his wife was with them. His guide told him she was, and that once he had found her, they must both immediately leave the valley and common with Lot's wife in the Bible, should not any account look back for any reason. The chief promised to do this, and he watched the dancers for several hours until he saw his wife. He called out to her, and she turned and saw him. She left the dancers and ran towards him, and they promptly fled to the rock ridge, leaving from Shiv-Oav to the cavern and the world above. However, he forgot his promise and turned to take one look back at where he'd been, and as he did so, his wife and the city immediately disappeared. Once he had recovered from the shock, he made his way out of the cavern and rejoined his tribe. He spent the rest of his life describing the peace, happiness, and beauty that he had found in the underground land. Legends like this were forgotten until, in 1947, they resurfaced when an article appeared in the San Diego Union Tribune. The article mentioned that several years previously, the remains of an ancient civilization had been found in the desert. These remains included an underground city containing gigantic skeletons and mummies wearing leather clothing, and the walls of the city were covered with strange carvings and images. This article also stated that in 1931, an archaeologist had located tunnels leading to the city underneath Death Valley, and he intended to excavate and explore his find. He said that work had already started removing the skeletons from the caverns, most of which were between 8 and 9 feet long. The article also suggested that out-of-place artifacts had been found, indicating that there was a level of technology present that was unlike the rest of the find. Like the mummies, the skeletons were still clad in garments, but these were made of hair, and the garments were of medium length, comprising a jacket and knee-length trousers. Initial testing suggested that the remains were in the region of 80,000 years old. It was also stated that another cavern had been found. This cavern, which they called the Temple, had apparently been used for ceremonies or rituals, and it contained objects and strange markings familiar to those used by the Freemasons. A long tunnel from this area led to another room containing the remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, elephants, and other animals, which were displayed in alcoves in the walls. The men got the impression that some catastrophe had occurred above ground and people had taken refuge in this elaborate cave system. The dwellings were well equipped, and among the articles found were objects that they could not recognize, and it was not until after 1947 that they were found to be microwave ovens. Furthermore, it appeared that the city had been lit using a form of gas lighting, which had been fueled by sources of natural gas. Elsewhere, there were huge stone doors that seemed to have been operated using a complex system of counterweights. This took the form of hundreds of globes dotted around the cave system. The globes contained pieces of stone that was found to be mildly radioactive, and it's thought that at one time may have provided a light source. In addition to this, other totally out-of-place devices resembling radio sets were also found. However, a few days after the first article appeared in the San Diego Union Tribune, another article entitled "Expedition Reports 9-Foot Skeletons" appeared in another Nevada newspaper, the now defunct Hot Citizen. Some view this as no more than something created by a reporter, while others believe the evidence is there and is being kept from the general public. One account from the early 1900s alleges that 2 men were traveling through Death Valley, and one of them allegedly fell into an old mine shaft at a place called Wingate Pass. Fortunately, he was not badly injured and could see odd shapes nearby. He called out to his companion, who climbed down to join him. They found themselves in a cavern, which they claimed to have followed about 20 miles into the heart of the Panamint Mountains. They claimed to have found themselves in another cavern containing a huge ancient underground city. They continued exploring and discovered that they had climbed some distance into the mountains, and although still underground, they could see openings some distance above the ground that led outside. They looked and realized that the valley below had once been underwater, and that the openings appeared to have once been designed to allow vessels to moor alongside. They realized that the valley was once underwater, and they eventually came to the conclusion that the arched openings had been ancient docks for seagoing vessels. The area around Wingate Pass, where the discoveries were made later, became part of the US Navy weapons testing facility at China Lake, and is now off limits to the public, and is currently impossible to check if any of these claims are accurate. However, governments will always conceal inconvenient evidence from the public. They've done this for decades, and this practice shows no signs of stopping anytime soon. According to Hindu legend, there was once a mystical kingdom located in the middle of the sea. The city was home to 900 palaces, all made of gold, and was supposed to have arisen out of the waters on the command of Lord Krishna. Recently, underwater archaeologists claim to have located what some believe to be the foundations of this fabulous lost city off the coast of modern Dwarka in western India. Char Dham, literally meaning the four abodes or seats, are the names of four pilgrimage sites in India that are widely revered by Hindus. It comprises of Badrinath, Dwarka, Puri, and Rameswaram. Dwarka is often identified with the Dwarka kingdom, the ancient kingdom of Krishna, and is believed to have been the first capital of Gujarat. According to legend, Krishna founded the city in Gujarat's west coast after he defeated and killed his uncle Kansa at Mathura. In Indian epic literature, the ancient city is also known as Dwarka. Traditionally, modern Dwarka is identified with Dwarka. Ancient Dwarka is supposed to have sank into the sea in remote history. The ancient and modern city, now known as Dwarka, is located on the western tip of the Saurashtra Peninsula in Gujarat, northwestern India. In the 14th century, the town's original temples were destroyed by the Delhi emperors, but the most important of them, Jagat Mandir, was subsequently rebuilt. Jagat Mandir, also known as the Dwarkadish Temple, is a Hindu temple dedicated to god Krishna, who is worshipped here with the name of Dwarkadish, or the King of Dwarka. The 5-story sandstone edifice is supported by 72 pillars and was constructed in the 15th to 16th centuries in the Chalukya style. It covers an area of 69 by 88.5 feet, with its spire a dizzying 257 feet high. The temple is visited by thousands of pilgrims every year. Ancient Dwarka is mentioned in a number of Indian texts, including the Mahabharata, the Shrimad, and the Bhagavad Gita. The Mahabharata describes Dwarka as having 900,000 royal palaces, all constructed of crystal and silver and decorated with emeralds. The ancient city was connected by an elaborate system of boulevards, roads, marketplaces, assembly houses, and temples. Archaeological investigations in the city of Dwarka and offshore in the Arabian Sea have been undertaken by the Archaeological Survey of India since the 1960s. Over the past decade or so, underwater excavations have uncovered interesting remains at a depth of 120 feet in the Gulf of Cambay off the western coast of India. Some reports claim these discoveries could be over 9,000 years old and cover an area 5 miles long and 2 miles wide. Marine archaeologists have used a technique known as sub-bottom profiling to reveal that the building's remains stand on enormous foundations. One news report in the New Indian Express from August 2018 stated sensationally, marine scientists say archaeological remains discovered 36 meters, 120 feet underwater in the Gulf of Cambay off the western coast of India could be over 9,000 years old. It's believed to predate the oldest known remains in the subcontinent by more than 5,000 years. Carbon dating on debris recovered from the site, including construction material, pottery, sections of walls, beads, sculpture, and human bones and teeth, put it at nearly 9,500 years old, making it older than the Sumerian civilization by several thousand years. It's also older than the Egyptian and Chinese civilizations. The city is believed to be even older than the ancient Harappan civilization. Sandstone walls and a grid of streets and other evidence of a seaport 70 feet underwater, alongside artifacts dating back to 7,500 BC, have convinced some researchers that finally the legendary city of 900,000 royal palaces has been located. The archaeological explorations off the coast of Dwarka have also brought to light a large number of stone structures. These are semicircular, rectangular, and square stone edifices scattered randomly over a vast area. Besides these structures, many varieties of stone anchors have been uncovered alongside the structures as well. Such findings suggest that the ancient Devaka was once a busy port, though the structures are thought to date to comparatively late in the site's history, probably belonging to the late medieval period. Indeed, various Indian historians have stated that the stone anchors match those used in the Indo-Arab trade from the 8th to 14th century AD. However, this recent date has not stopped some from claiming that the remains represent the legendary lost city of Devaka and so must be 9,000 years old. The lead archaeologist of a number of excavations at the site, the late Dr. S.R. Rao, described the town plan of early Devaka based on his team's discoveries. There were 2 fortification walls, one on the lower terrace and other in the middle terrace. These walls, which extend over a length of 4 kilometers on the eastern shore, are mostly destroyed by sea action. The walls of the lower terrace are of massive, dressed sandstone blocks, while that of the upper terrace are of rubble. The houses and other public buildings, built of smaller-sized stones within the enclosures, are all destroyed and leveled up by the encroachment of the sea. These structures lie at a depth of 7 to 10 meters below the present mean sea level, indicating a rise of 10 meters in sea level during the last 3,600 years. In the opinion of some researchers, the rise in sea level mentioned by Dr. Rao seems to indicate that ancient Devaka was destroyed by a great flood. Indeed, for some archaeological proof of the existence of the Devaka and its submergence, perhaps in the 2nd millennium BC, reflects the truth of the descriptions in the Mahabharata. For them, the finds would make the Mahabharata not merely a book of myths and legends, but to some extent a genuine account of past events. In September 2019, it seemed that final proof for the wonderful architectural achievements of ancient Devaka have been discovered underwater off modern Dwarka. A Twitter user going by the name @JIKS shared 4 sensational photos showing ornately decorated underwater sculptures and structures, with one resembling a temple tower. There was a claim accompanying the image which stated, "Sri Krishna's Dwarka, the sunken city in Gujarat, as described in the Mahabharata. It is real, yet the Christian world says there is no proof." The tweet was retweeted over 1,500 times. However, subsequent research into the 4 images revealed the falseness of the claim. One image, showing the sculpture of a lion with its left paw resting on a ball, was traced to an underwater memorial reef near Key Biscayne in Miami, Florida. It is the largest man-made reef in the world and contains 2 statues of lions to mark the entrance to the site. It is a photo of one of these lions which was used on Twitter as proof of new discoveries from ancient Devaka. The 3 other images were also traced to various other online sources, including various photoshopped composite images using various temple remains collected from all over the world. Consequently, it's obvious that the images used on Twitter have no connection whatsoever to ancient Devaka. Indeed, the whole claim of a submerged civilization off the coast of Dwarka, dating back 9,000 years, rests on extremely shaky grounds. In the media accounts of the discoveries, the claim of the city being 9,000 years old is based entirely on one radiocarbon date from a single piece of wood. But this piece of wood could very easily have belonged to a tree that existed prior to these underwater remains. No other object from the excavations has actually been dated. Experts have pointed out that the area in which remains have been found has huge tidal movements which would have moved artifacts and even structures around, perhaps many miles from their original locations. Furthermore, many of these stone objects found seem to be geofacts rather than artifacts, that is, natural objects made by water and sand erosion. The argument that there's a submerged 9,000-year-old Devaka in the area is based on the premise that a submerged coastal settlement could only have been built when sea levels were much lower. A few years ago, when officials in Turkey went to investigate flooding in the Nevşehir province, they uncovered a vast, massive network of underground tunnels. Recent research has revealed that these tunnels from a subterranean city may date back 5,000 years. The massive web of man-made tunnels and caverns extends 3 miles underground and contains 3 stories of homes, places of worship, and areas for mass congregation. It's now believed to be the biggest underground city ever built. Fascinatingly, it is only one of perhaps 200 mysterious underground cities in the Cappadocia region of Turkey. Recently, an announcement was made in the media that shocked the archaeological world. The world's oldest underground city had been discovered in Turkey, partly submerged underwater. The discovery of the ancient city was made in the province of Nevşehir in Cappadocia, a semi-arid region of central Turkey. It took place when around 1,500 houses in 11 neighborhoods around an ancient Byzantine citadel in central Nevşehir were being demolished by the Housing Development Administration, TOKİ, to start a new urban project. The director of TOKİ, Mehmet Ergun Turan, said, "We stopped the construction we were planning to do on these areas when an underground city was discovered." Initial examination found roughly 4.3 miles long underground city of 3 floors, consisting of houses, tunnels, churches, wine cellars, food storage areas and galleries. The mayor of Nevşehir, Hazar Unver, commented on the huge importance of the find. He said, "The underground city was found in the 45 hectares of the local 75-hectare area that is within the Urban Transformation Project. We applied to the Cultural and Natural Heritage Preservation Board and the area was officially registered. It has a 7-kilometer road dotted with churches, galleries and other structures. It's estimated that the city dates back to the era of the Hittites, similar to other underground cities. We are now working to make it open for visitors. We will build walking platforms inside and a large park will be built on the surface. The other underground cities in Nevşehir's various districts do not even amount to the kitchen of this new underground city." Realizing the immense importance of the discovery of the Nevşehir city, authorities abruptly halted the housing project and called in archaeologists and geophysicists who began investigating on the site. Özgen Kakia, an associate professor at the Çanakkale 18th March University, who was involved in the excavations, believed that the tunnels at the site were used to carry agricultural products. He said, "We believe that people who were engaged in agriculture were using the tunnels to carry agricultural products to the city. We also estimate that one of the tunnels passes under Nevşehir and reaches a faraway water source." Indeed, most academics believe that the huge network of underground houses and tunnels was home to thousands of people who were part of a farming community that existed around 3000 BC. Local folklore talks of an underground city in the area which people call Girgor, which translates into English as enter and see. Geophysicists from Nevşehir University conducted a detailed survey of the site and found it to cover almost 5 million square feet. The survey also suggests that the underground corridors may reach down as deep as 371 feet, which would make it the largest of all underground cities. Mayor Hazar Unver commented on the results of the extensive archaeological work being carried out at the site. He said, "We have reached 7-kilometer-long galleries, unearthed a normal living space, as well as a 12th century rock-carved church, a 6th century monastery, and mosque-like religious places, which date back to the Seljuk era. We've also found horse barns where military horses had been cared for. In addition, we found 4 oil houses and hundreds of tobacco pipes made of meerschaum. Everything here is under our control." The newly discovered site at Nevşehir lies beneath the Byzantine-era hilltop castle in an area which is home to countless subterranean settlements of varying sizes and possibly of varying dates as well. The largest of these is in the Derinkuyu district, just over 18 miles from Nevşehir, and goes down to a depth of approximately 197 feet, equal to the height of an 8th-story building, and large enough to accommodate around 20,000 people. The massive underground city has thousands of ventilation shafts and water channels which provided fresh air and water to each level of the site. Derinkuyu was probably first established around the 7th or 8th century BC, most likely as protection against invading forces. The city was protected by doors which consisted of massive stone wheels that could be rolled into place to block an entrance. One of Derinkuyu's most interesting features is a large room with vaulted ceilings, which is believed to have been a religious school with a separate study room. Derinkuyu was also connected to other underground cities in the region through a sophisticated network of tunnels. These enigmatic underground cities in Cappadocia were carved into the soft volcanic rock thousands of years ago. But as stone is non-organic, it's difficult to accurately date these cities. They may have been originated during the Hittite period from 1600 to 1200 BC, or even earlier. They're often attributed to the Phrygians, an ancient people of west-central Anatolia, whose most famous king was Midas of the Golden Touch. The state of Phrygia arose in the region in the 8th century BC. Since ancient times, Turkey has been a major trade hub between Asia and Europe, and thus has been invaded and conquered repeatedly by different peoples over thousands of years. Consequently, the purpose of these underground cities is usually connected with concealment from invaders. The most active period of inhabitation of these subterranean worlds was during the Byzantine period from 395 AD to 1453 AD, when regular invasions by foreign armies forced locals to hide underground. Many of these cities continued in use right up until the 20th century, when people hid there to save themselves from persecution during the Ottoman Empire. In fact, it was not until 1923, after the population exchange between Greece and Turkey, that these underground cities were finally abandoned and not rediscovered until 1963. At the moment, Derinkuyu is the largest excavated underground city in the world, but many believe that when Nevşehir is fully excavated, that title may well change hands. There are a staggering 200 or more underground towns and cities in Cappadocia, many of which are wholly or partly open to the public. One of the best known of them is Kaymakli underground town, located about 12 miles from Nevşehir and built under the hill known as the Citadel of Kaymakli. It's connected to Derinkuyu by miles of ancient tunnels and was open to visitors as early as 1964. The subterranean town consists of 8 floors, 4 of which are open to the public today. The spaces in the underground town, which are organized around ventilation shafts, were made into stables, storage rooms, wineries, and kitchens. Archaeologists believe this underground village could have been a temporary home for up to 3,500 people. On the 3rd level of the settlement, archaeologists discovered an unusual block of andesite, which was used by the ancient inhabitants for cold-forming copper. The ancient name of the town was Enigup, and experts believe construction may have begun by the Phrygians in the 8th to 7th centuries BC. It was used much later in the Byzantine era for protection against Muslim Arabs during the Arab-Byzantine Wars of 780 to 1180 AD. The modern village on the site is built almost around 100 tunnels of the underground city. These tunnels are still used today by the villagers as storage areas, stables and cellars, accessed via the courtyards of the houses in the village. There is actually an astonishing eyewitness account of these underground Cappadocian cities, which gives us a vivid idea of what they must have been like. It was written in 370 BC by the ancient Greek professional soldier and writer Xenophon, and tells of the expedition of a large army of Greek mercenaries hired by Persian Prince Cyrus the Younger to help him seize the throne of Persia from his brother. During their travels, they came upon a strange village somewhere in Anatolia, modern Turkey, which Xenophon describes as follows. The houses were underground, with a mouth like that of a well, but spacious below, and while entrances were tunneled down for the beasts of burden, the human inhabitants descended by ladder. In the houses were goats, sheep, cattle, fowl, and their young, and all the animals were reared and took their fodder there in the houses. Here were also wheat, barley and beans, and barley wine in large bowls. Floating on the top of this drink were the barley grains, and in it were straws, some larger and others smaller, without joints, and when one was thirsty, one had to take these straws into his mouth and suck. It was an extremely strong drink unless one diluted it with water, and extremely good when one was used to it.